Most of you know Firestone for their amazing barrel-aged and sour beers, maybe their DBA. But the company's largest and most successful brand now is actually an approachable golden ale called 805. And the 805 brand is a deliberate departure from Firestone's higher-end, more esoteric offerings, and it's found white space in a beer category that is incredibly noisy. Year to date, through November 4th, sales of the brand were up 22%, and it's generated nearly $45 million in off-premise retail sales, according to IRI. So the question David gets asked all the time by brewers across the country is, how can I replicate the success of 805 and create a brand like that? And he usually doesn't have an answer for folks, but let's see if we can squeeze one out of him today. So David Walker, come on up. All right. So what do you make of the Nielson presentation?
It was great. A lot of information, a lot of data. Part of me though sits there and sort of listens to this sense that it's experience and variety and all of those things. And I think about the way I make choices, and that basically plays into it. But convenience, familiarity, service, quality. Those things also work,
right?
And I think it's very complicated. Some psychologist said you can only actually manage 140 friends in your head. I don't know how they dreamed that up, but someone else repeated it and agreed. So I'm in. I don't know how many bars and tap rooms and watering holes you can actually manage in your head.
Yeah.
And unless you're sort of on an adventure. I think most people have got sort of a handful of places where they meet friends, where they know they can get certain things, and they gravitate towards them.
So it sounds like predictability and reliability are keys.
I think they're part of it. They're not keys. I don't think we don't live in a world of absolutes. I mean, I think things are more and more complicated, and you have to have all things aligned, really, for things to work. But yeah, it's sort of an really interesting debate.
I went to your tap room the other night.
Great.
And, I noticed, I was just taking a look at the crowd there, and it seemed like a little bit of an older crowd, a lot of people drinking full pints. I saw, contrary to kind of what Nielsen just presented, actually less sampling and sort of flights and stuff. What have you noticed just kind of looking at your own taproom business about, how consumers are engaging with the product inside your four walls?
Taprooms to us it's the theater of our brewery. I mean, it's where we actually get to touch customers, talk to them, see them enjoy the beer. I mean, it really is that sort of unfiltered experience, and we love it. But it's difficult. And, probably a ton of breweries of our vintage, we're 20 plus years old, we were somewhat sensitive to poking the three-tier bear. So we've always been very intentional about our tap rooms, and we've always attached them to breweries, and they've always had a form and function because of that. So we use our tap rooms as a way to tell the stories that we're trying to tell as a brewery at that time. We don't have spirits. We sell a little bit of wine. It's in kegs and from some of our local winemakers in the area. We have a lot of service. In California, California, and legitimately so, is sort of pushing for a sort of a working wage for people, and so minimum wage is an issue. And running, service-heavy, labor-intensive tap rooms is not a recipe for a great business. But we do it for the experience, for the exposure. And we get a lot of feedback on what's going on. I mean, Venice is, we put Venice together as our pilot brewery. We were going to put a pilot brewery in Paso, and we said, why don't we put it in the middle of our biggest market? We bought a cool building down there about 5 years ago, and we call it our propagator, and we do all our experimental brewing down there now. And we get a lot of feedback there. It's very useful to us. But we're very sensitive to the fact we don't want to compete with with our partners and with our customers. And I'm not naive enough to think that we don't compete with them, because we do a little bit. But our beer's more expensive, and our model is very much a brewery tasting room tap room.
Yeah. Where do you see it all going in the future, the whole tap room?
Oh, yeah, I think tap rooms, as long as they're high quality and convenient and super cool, will go on forever. I think, if you can justify opening a pizza joint for $50,000 a month in revenues, why not open a brew pub and pizza joint? And I think it's quite a profitable model. When you're making the beer and you're giving it to the customer, it's actually very rewarding. I can see it going on as long as people want to attend tap rooms.
Or as long as people want to eat pizza and drink beer.
Bingo. And, people have been drinking beer for several thousand years. I don't think it's going to change in a hurry. I think it's here forever.
Yeah. Beyond the tap room, I sort of mentioned it in my introduction, but you guys have built quite a little business with 805, and it's a little bit of a runaway train now. People always ask you how you did it. What was sort of the secret to the success of 805?
Oh, sure. I'll tell you it right now. The great thing is I don't really know. I would say it was sort of well-earned serendipity. We were dealt, without question, a hot hand. But just because we were dealt a hot hand, you can't show at a poker game and ask the dealer to give you a hot hand because you want to win. You have to be sitting at the table a long time to be dealt a hot hand. And we, technically, obviously it's been transformational for us. For 15 years we grew at a sort of 5 to 10% a year. We launched 805 and it went to a compound of whatever it is, 35%. And it's been transformational. But I think in short, and I think brewers in the room will understand this, I think for anything like 805 to succeed, you need to have all 4 tiers aligned. And, I see the world in 4 tiers. The brewery, the wholesaler channel, the retailers, and then most importantly, the consumer. I think if you can get all 4 of those aligned, then you can hit the jackpot. And that's not easy. As a brewery, we've been around for 15 years. We knew how to make sublimely good beer, keep that beer at a very high quality, repeat it, make it affordable. We then had the scar tissue to understand that we had to communicate what the beer was in an understandable way, not overplay our hand. Then we needed to have trusted relationships with wholesalers who'd been with us in the trenches for 10 plus years, who said, yeah, we'll give it a go. And not just give us lip service. And then we needed retailers who trusted us. And then ultimately we needed consumers who said, yeah, we know those guys and we sort of understand what they're doing, and I think we'll give it a go. And I think because that alignment was there, it worked. And it's very hard to do. We don't do it all the time.
What are the factors that contribute to that alignment? Is it product? Is it branding? Is it execution? How do you rank?
All of those things.
All of those.
It's all of those things. That's why I said they have to be aligned. I think if you have one, if you have great beer, and you have consumers who want the beer, but you don't have a decent wholesaler channel and the retailers won't present your product, then these two don't connect. We can split it up into as many different versions as you like. If you've got a great wholesaler and a great beer, but the retailers won't present the beer, then the consumers don't get it. So it's when you have all 4 aligned and excited, and that's the key thing, they need to be excited. We've talked about this before. I learned so much about American wholesalers once we launched 805. For years, we were going into our wholesalers and pleading with them to, sell a certain beer and move it from 8,700 cases to 9,200 cases. And, the guys were very polite to us and says, yeah, we'll do our best, thanks a lot. But then when they left the room, they had to go back and sell 3 million cases of a beer that was keeping the lights on.
Right.
And so it would have been absolutely reckless if they would have abandoned their whole main initiative to sort of readjust for ours. And so we were always only getting a fraction of their share of mind, which is logical. But once we were able to actually deliver a beer that, consumers were sort of ripping out of the warehouse, then all of a sudden you really saw the muscle of American wholesalers and how incredibly efficient and effective they are.
How did that change the way you guys operate? Because you went from, being a business that was just like any other craft brewery to now delivering a product that was, distributed and retailed in a completely different manner.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it in perspective. I mean, we're selling more beer than my wildest dreams. 450,000 barrels this year, but there's quite a few breweries of our size out there. I mean, it's not as if we've sort of eclipsed that. We're very, very much a fighting craft brewer, same size as Stone and many others.
Sure.
It really hasn't changed that much. I mean, we spend a disproportionate amount of time probably on all other beers other than 805. We're doing all the same things. We're spending a lot of time in the on-premise. We're spending a lot of time with our people. I mean, we're doing all the things that everybody else is doing to grow their breweries.
Yeah. You talked about, when we spoke earlier this month, you talked about the idea of wanting to position 805 in retail in a completely different way, wanting to have it presented almost more like a mainstream offering so that it was volume driven in a sense and not necessarily positioned alongside traditional craft in order to capture a different consumer. What was sort of the learning process there, and how did you get wholesalers to get behind that idea?
Well, once again, we sort of stumbled on that. I mean, we launched 805 in our local area. And in our local area, we have great distribution. So we're sort of the everyman's beer. I mean, you can find Union Jack bottle caps in the strawberry fields of Santa Maria. So we had to make a beer for more than just the 15, 20% that were, that were waiting for the next Parabola release. That's what we did with 805. I mean, like I said, to a certain extent, we stumbled on the fact that it was a crowd pleaser. It was very drinkable. We took notice of that. We listened to our customers, and then sort of developed it from there. And that sort of led to this belief that, well, maybe we shouldn't take 805 to beer festivals. Maybe we should take 805 to motorcycle festivals, where everyone's drinking Pabst or PBR or Bud Light. I mean, let's go talk to those people. And we developed it that way, and it seemed to work.
Do you think that could work for other breweries?
I'm sure you could. I'm sure it could. I think if you show it with a hazy IPA at a motorcycle festival, they'll probably do that. I mean, I think you need to. Yeah, I mean, you need to understand who you're talking to.
Yeah. Where would Firestone be if it weren't for 805? If that product hadn't been developed and hadn't taken off like it did, where would you guys be today?
Oh, I don't know. We'd probably be exactly where we are. We'd probably have a few less fermenters, but we'd probably be exactly where we are.
Do you think you guys still would be growing as much as you are?
No, I don't think we would have had the meteoric growth that we had with 805. I think we would have stayed pretty well much in line with where we were prior to that point, Yeah, I mean, I think what we call our Lion and Bear side of our business is healthy. It's we have it in 30 states. 805 is not in every state that we're in, and I mean, we would obviously be significantly smaller, probably half our size, but that's still, to me, beyond my wildest dreams in terms of what we set out to achieve.
Yeah, you mentioned the distribution piece of it, and you guys are starting to expand 805 into some new markets now. What's that process been like, taking it from a really local brand to Paso Robles and Central California, and trying to sell 805 in Chicago, for instance?
We're still learning. We went to Chicago actually because there's a great connection to Arizona. There's a strong Hispanic community there, and 805 has resonated in both areas. And we were just sort of interested to see if it would, if it would work. It obviously, the sweetest beer is the beer that's sold closest to the brewery. I mean, you can draw concentric circles around our brewery and look at rate of sale, and there's a nexus you can draw between it. So we know the further away we get from the brewery, the less relevant we are. But it's turned out to be pretty good. I mean, I've been surprised by how well it's been embraced.
Yeah. How much opportunity do you think exists for other brands, be it an 805 or anything else, or an 805-like brand or anything else, to get outside of the local market and build a following that's further away than 100 miles, which is what we hear.
I think
so
brands
much
do it all the time. I mean, give me the secret to all-day IPA. I mean,
sure.
We make a beautiful session IPA, and everybody tells me, nah, that beer won't sell. I'm scratching my head and pointing over here. And what the rhyme and reason of a lot of this stuff is really hard to drop into a little how-to-do manual. I think a lot of
what we want from
I know you do, yeah. It's all about being engaged and working it and working it and working it and loving it, and just sort of being inspired by the creativity that goes on in the brewery, and being encouraged by the way that your partners and the consumers react, and it's just a million little adjustments, and I think that's what yields things like All Day IPA, and I know Sam's having a great run with Sequench. Yep. It is just to keep trying.
Perseverance, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what's next on the horizon for you guys? You mentioned a product like Sequench. Are you guys, and we've talked a lot about health and wellness already during this conference, you guys looking at that space? Are you guys trying to innovate in a different direction, or just still kind of riding behind 805 and trying to go out and execute?
Hey, we're definitely not trying to ride behind it. I mean, we're like I've said, we can't really take our eyes off 805, but we're very engaged, obviously, with innovation. I mean, we love brewing beer and making beer. We've got some nice things coming out next year. I mean, I think we're going to play in the hazy space, which is it's taken us a while to come to terms with that, but we've been experimenting with in Venice now for 2 years. In fact, actually, Matt Brynelson, my partner in crime and our brewer, was in Germany a couple of weeks ago, and he was drinking this age-old Hefeweizen in an age-old brewery, I think called Gutmann, and he's drinking this beer, and it's turbid, and it's thick, and it's hazy, and it's fruity. And he said, we could take this beer, drop it into Massachusetts, and people would say that's the best hazy IPA I've ever tasted. They've been brewing this beer for 50 years. Anyway, the point that I'm making is we've sort of understood the impact. We've understood the beer. We're going to make a beer in that space, so that's good. We're working a little bit with wine beer hybrids. We're in the middle of wine country. Obviously our roots are in vineyards. We have 40,000 gallons of Chenin Blanc and Chardonnay sitting in tanks at the brewery right now, and we'll be blending a beer wine hybrid next year that hopefully will capture people's interest.
Now, is that purely out of just curiosity, or is it an attempt to bring in some wine drinkers?
No, actually, predictably, it's going into the rosé sector. But no, we've played in that space a lot with our wild ales, and played in that space. I'm at Brewbound. Why am I talking like that? We've brewed beers like that, and so we like them. And we're surrounded by winemakers. We work with them on our anniversary. I mean, they're constantly sort of jonesing to get in on the action. And so we, it's just something we're interested in.
Yeah, so wine beer hybrids, hazy IPAs, 805 is a more sessionable product.
Yep.
These are all sort of the trends that we've been writing about and we've been seeing
Yeah.
across the board. In terms of growing the category, do you think that this is sort of the right way to grow the category? I'm thinking specifically of the sessionable products, and we've seen that pendulum swing kind of back. And now we're seeing, a lot of smaller brewers do light lagers and 15 packs and buck of beer, that sort of thing. What does the category risk when it grows in that direction?
Yeah, I'm not sure it risks anything. I mean, if you look at the big picture, the big brewers that have still dominate the American beer business, but dominated it a hell of a lot more 20 years ago. I mean, they've lost 30, 40 million barrels of, below premium beer. I think consumers still want to drink beer. I just don't think they want to drink their grandfather's beer. And you can dress your grandfather up in a new pullover, but it's still your grandfather. And I think that as new consumers sort of pull into the market, they might be seeking out lighter flavors, but they just want it of today. They want things that are of their generation. Yeah. And there's going to be hundreds of breweries that dine out on that for the next 20 years.
Yeah, so it's more about having a badge and something that they feel proud to hold.
Well, hasn't it always been like that?
I mean, I guess so.
Yeah, that's just the nature of evolution and branding and.
Yeah, but I mean, for years you've seen craft brewers really rely on the intrinsic value of the product quality. Yep. And how it's so different from macro beer and.
Yeah, well, hang on a second. Let's not commingle the two. I mean, table stakes is the beer's got to be unbelievably good.
Right.
It's got to be better than everybody else's. It's got to be affordable. It's got to be innovative. It's got to be of today. I mean, you can't just show up because you showed up and you're different, expect to win. That's not going to happen. You've got to be better than that. And if you're not better, you won't supplant those breweries.
But the branding has become such a integral part of the business now. And, just looking at like 805, I mean, it's a sleek black can and the image is, sure it says Firestone Walker on there, but it's a complete departure from what you guys do with your other beers and the look and the feel and the way that you speak about it and the identity that you've built. And
right.
I guess my question is sort of, do you feel like that is going to, at some point, be more important in some ways than the actual liquid in the can?
No, I think they're the same. I think that it's as important. I mean, I think there was a time when it actually didn't matter what you were communicating, and that really all you were seeking was the beer. But I think you need to have the whole package.
Yeah. We talked about cannabis yesterday, and you're here in California,
yep.
Obviously. How do you think the emergence of recreational cannabis is going to impact brewers?
There's a lot of chat about it. I mean, we all read the blogs. I mean, some smart chap said it was going to take 10% of, out of the alcohol business, and it was going to emerge slowly over the next 5-6 years. Assuming it's legalized and it's kosher and it's federally accepted and people can buy it and sell it, I mean, I think it'll play a role. Certainly as far as we're concerned, I mean this in the best possible way. I mean, we started our brewery to make great beer, and we set out to make pale ales. We got lured into making beautiful California pale ales. I mean, we didn't set out sort of chasing psychoactive potions. I mean, that wasn't the whole idea. The whole idea was drinking great beer.
Yeah.
Now, without question, alcohol is psychoactive. So is caffeine. So's weed. But just because it has an impact doesn't mean we're going to embrace it. If it profoundly changes the flavor of the beer in a positive way, like cashmere, then we might consider it. But I'm not seeing that at the moment. But I absolutely see it playing a role. I'm not sure that It won't show up as a vape or a cream or a edible before it shows up on tap.
Yeah.
It's gonna play in every sector.
Do you think we spend too much time in the industry worrying about
Yeah,
things like cannabis?
absolutely.
Talking about
Yeah, we freak out about everything. It's
But
I mean,
this is what creates
extraordinary.
good content.
I know. It's the world we live in.
Yeah. So what should we be talking about instead?
How great the craft beer business is.
Yeah.
I mean, the craft beer business is a phenomenal story of American ingenuity, and I like to say, and actually it was said by someone else. It was actually said by my partner again, Matt Brynelson. We've changed the world of beer. Craft brewers have done that. 20 years ago, us, several hundred and several thousand that followed us, we changed the way the world looked at beer. And it threw ripples right across America in terms of the way that beer was distributed, drunk, brewed, purchased, and so forth. That in turn spent ripples across the world. And American brewers should really pat themselves on the back for that. And we've created enough of a disruption to, I think, ripples will continue.
Yeah.
There's 7,200 breweries today, 2,000 in development. And I think 2-3 years ago, I said there'd be 10,000, and you sort of winced at me. I think there'll be more than 10,000. I think it's good.
But can we support that many breweries? I mean, you look at overall beer consumption still relatively flat, and a lot of maybe it's just a shifting of the way the pie gets broken up.
I think it is.
It just seems almost unsustainable that sure, we can have 10,000, but is that adding any value to the category?
I think there's a couple of factors, and I'm not an economist or an analyst, but I think too few brands had too big a piece of the market, and I think what's happening is those brands have contracted and will continue to contract. I think variety will flood into that vacuum. It's already doing it. I think competition is a hell of a lot more fierce today than it was 5 years ago, but I think we've hit a steady state. I think the big brewers, the brewers who have muscle, who have the ability to manipulate the market because they got great relationships and marketing and sales. I think those brewers have played their hands. They've purchased some beautiful breweries, and they're sort of working their plan. But I don't think they're accelerating. I mean, I think big brewers see craft as whatever it is, 15% of throat. That's the way they see it. It's sort of it's sort of a piece in a puzzle for them. We see it as everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a big difference. So I think big brewers will continue to do what they do, and the several thousand brewers and more to come that will be brewing beer and selling beer, and obviously be incredibly intensive competition for us. I think those guys continue. But ultimately, as you were saying earlier, I mean, if you've got one brewer in a village, they get all the customers. If you've got 20 brewers in a village, they share those customers 20 times. Yep. And eventually that 94% of breweries will, they'll keep coming, but their model will change. I mean, I think there's breweries starting every day who never, ever believe that they're going to package and bottle their beer. They're always going to have this just beautiful small brewery, direct to retail, and that's what they've done. I mean, just because, I hate to use the analogy, just because I start a pizza restaurant doesn't mean I want to box it up and sell it to Trader Joe's. And I think there's a whole generation of brewers who are starting for no other reason than they love beer, they love their beer, they want to share their beer, they love brewing, and they have a really meaningful life and living running a great tap room in a small community.
Yeah, well, hopefully all those brewers, want to do that for their careers and, spend 20, 30 years kind of grinding it out that way. Others probably have aspirations of growing a business and scaling and maybe selling
absolutely,
it someday.
And they will.
And do you think those opportunities will still be out there for brewers to, kind of build what you built?
Yeah. I mean, without question, we had huge advantage by starting our brewing 22 years ago. And there was, as much as there was a lot of indifference and there was a lot of hurdles to get going. We were lucky enough to be slightly ahead of the curve. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult to start a brewery today and scale it to 400,000 barrels in 20 years. But it's not impossible. And I mean, it's happened. You know, I'm looking at breweries that were started 5 years ago that are, you know, predicting 100,000 barrels in sales. There's some amazing stories out there. So, yeah, I mean, back to the point I made. It's good to be a craft brewer.
Yeah. Well, on that note, let's go have a coffee. Yeah. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Cheers.